We're not talking aspirin, we're not talking antibiotics. We're talking opium, the most addictive molecule, replicated it in massive quantities of high potency, put it in a pill, and then sold it to the most trusted people in America wearing white coats at pharmacies.
As non-addictive.
As non-addictive.
Thursday morning in Puerto Rico, and our first guest today on the John and Mark podcast is former presidential candidate Paul Farrell, also co-lead of the opioid litigation, also involved in the Google antitrust litigation to help protect some of the publishers, the small guys. If you are in the mass tort world, you know Paul. We're going to get deep into some of his involvement in these specific cases, and I want to know what actually happened with your presidential run. We will get into that too, but thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Paul, we're in Puerto Rico. I'm covered in linen.
Yes.
We have a beautiful view.
Yes.
And everyone I've talked to, I said we needed to speak with you.
Okay.
They didn't say why, but they kept saying you need to talk to Paul.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. The opioid litigation, I didn't realize you were the man behind the scenes on that humongous litigation that's still ongoing. How much have you guys recovered so far? Where is it in the process? We'd love to just learn more about that, because recently was just in the news cycle again.
The short answer is we've recovered about $70 billion, and most of the money we have structured in settlement to cities, counties, and states with guardrails to use only for abatement of opioid use, abuse, morbidity, and mortality. So in short, what we're trying to do is avoid the tobacco settlement scenario where the money gets picked up by the state legislatures and disappears into the public digest and the budgets. And so we've created in each of the 50 states some type of structure so we know the money gets spent to help addiction. We started the case at the top of the food chain, the manufacturers, Purdue Pharma, then the generics, and then the distributors, and then we moved on to the chain pharmacies. And now we're on the fourth and last iteration, I think, of the pharmacy benefit managers.
This is a topic that I personally care a lot about. My father was addicted to opioids for a while. He got a really bad accident when I was probably 12, 13 years old. I think you know this story. He used to work in a prison, and the elevator malfunctioned. Big old prison elevator door, sensor broke, and knocked him to the ground. And knocked out all of his teeth, hurt his back, couldn't work again after that. And, the way that he dealt with it was with oxycodone, hydrocodone. It doesn't just affect the individual, it affects the family. It's a major, major problem. I don't think people actually know what you just said, that the recoveries for this case is going into fixing the problem as opposed to just compensation for the damages that have occurred. And I personally, I did not know that. And I thank you for that and for continuing to pursue that, because that is something that is,
especially the
really,
point where
really
you made
good.
where the city and state legislators get the money, then it's
gone.
Disappears.
Yeah.
And no one gets helped.
So in West Virginia with the tobacco settlement, I think we used the money to retire public debt, to especially our workers' compensation public funds, and for infrastructure in the state. Very little of it was actually used for tobacco cessation. We had that consciously in mind when we started this litigation, and it was the reason that we structured it the way that we did. So my hometown in Huntington, West Virginia is ground zero. It's one of the earliest places that you can see the blossom of the opioid epidemic. There's a great book. There's a lot of great books, but the book that I cherish the most is called Dreamland by Sam Quinones. And he talks about the intersection between the prescription pill flood and the intersection with heroin, black tar heroin from Mexico. And chapter 2 is called Huntington, West Virginia, where he's sitting on the riverbank, sort of wondering how it is that we got to this position we're in. It's one of the early foundations for how I began to think about it. Back in 2016, we had newspaper headlines in West Virginia, which is going to tie into my Google case later. The Charleston Gazette, the headlines of the Charleston Gazette said 700 million pills, 1,700 deaths. Some local journalist got a hold of some data accidentally from the DEA that revealed the volume of pills that were distributed into the state of West Virginia.
That's insane.
Now, to give you some perspective, we have 1.3 million people in the state of West Virginia.
700,000 pills.
700 million
700 million pills.
in a 6-year window.
And 17,000.
Just in West Virginia.
Yes. So my father's a judge, and every Sunday morning he has a breakfast for the boys and their families. You know, he puts on an apron and he cooks eggs and bacon after church. And so I remember I was sitting at the kitchen table, and my mom has that newspaper, and she plops it down in front of me, and she says, "What are you going to do about it?" I said, "Mom, that's not what I do. I'm a personal injury lawyer." And she says, "Well, you should do something about it." So I took that challenge and started thinking about it. And there was just something in the back of my mind that triggered that this wasn't really a personal injury case. It was like if the Exxon Valdez crashed into the shores of Alaska and dumped oil everywhere, the private landowners would have a remedy, but also in general, the public would have a remedy for the damage to the infrastructure, the water, the beach line, the ocean, right? There's a public nuisance consequence, a common law public nuisance consequence to behavior, especially at a corporate level. And so I got out the West Virginia Code and I started thinking about who has standing to bring a public nuisance case on behalf of the public. Not a private cause of action for a public nuisance, but if the public has a cause of action, who has standing? And I started flipping through it, and I came across this one code section that said that our county commissioners have standing to eliminate hazards to public health and safety and abate or cause to be abated public nuisances. So I went to the next county commission meeting and said to the 3 commissioners, "I got this code section. It says here, you have a standing to do something about this. Let me do something for you. I'll pay for it. If we lose, I'll eat all the costs. If we win, you owe me a fee." And they said, "Sure."
You treated it like a true plaintiff's lawyer.
I filed the first public nuisance case on behalf of my hometown, Cabell County, West Virginia. And then as word started to spread, I went down into the southern coal fields. I went across the Ohio River to southern Ohio. I went over into eastern Kentucky, and I wound up with about 40 counties that were in the heart of this devastation of pills, in basically at the apex of the devastation. All of a sudden, like any true epidemic, the hot spots started popping up in other places around the country, right? New Mexico was a hot spot. If you look at the CDC death maps now, you can see over time the flare of the opioid epidemic. And slowly this thing started, getting more and more attention. An MDL was formed. I got appointed co-lead of the MDL, and a little hillbilly lawyer from West Virginia got to be in charge of the biggest, most complex case in the history of our MDL world.
Where does it currently sit now?
So we're in Cleveland, Ohio still, and there's about 3,000 cases, 3,000 counties and cities across the country have all joined in. And we've settled with the 3 of the 4. There's a chain of distribution that you can follow: the manufacturers, the distributors, the pharmacies. Those cases are 95% done, some stragglers. And the newest iteration is we're exploring the role of pharmacy benefit managers, the health insurance companies that have all vertically and integrated and control the formularies in America, and have contracts, rebate contracts with the manufacturers.
I've learned a little bit about those recently.
Yeah.
Those are quite a scheme.
It's a corporate structure that seems to have grown so substantially and so significantly. The amount of power and control they have over healthcare decisions is astonishing.
So the premise of the case in a 30-second summary is that the manufacturers, the distributors, the pharmacies are all aware of what's going on, and that the pills aren't necessarily going to the end user to use them, or they are, and they're clearly being done at a or being prescribed at a rate that they should not be prescribed?
Both.
Both, right? But those are the two
Sure.
avenues?
We call it, the legal term for it is diversion, is that the pills are going in such quantity to so many people that it's clear, facially evident, that the pills cannot have a legitimate medical purpose. So when you look and you see 1 million pills a year going through one pharmacy in a town of 1,700 people, clearly and objectively, there's no legitimate medical purpose for that, right? There are controls in the system required by federal law to identify those anomalies and to prevent them. So whether it's from at the manufacturer level or the distributor level or the CVSs of the world, they have data points that indicate not just where the pills are leaking, but where they're just gouged, just flowing out unrestricted, like a Pez dispenser. And so it's for those people that we have held accountable for controlling controlled substances. Because remember, we're not talking aspirin, we're not talking antibiotics, we're talking opium.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking opium. We're talking the most addictive molecule created by God, man, and in this case, the American pharmaceutical industry, isolated that molecule, replicated it in massive quantities of high potency, put it in a pill, and then sold it to the most trusted people in America wearing white coats at pharmacies.
As non-addictive.
As non-addictive.
Have you ever taken a pill?
I have, absolutely.
Have you ever taken a pill?
Yeah. Well, like surgery.
How does it make you feel?
I get pretty sleepy.
How did it make you feel?
Sleepy.
Where are you going with this?
I'm just talking. No, like this is like the reality of it is it's real people who take these things for real reasons and it turns into something else. Like I have like an emergency prescription of I think it's hydrocodone. So I have spinal stenosis in my back.
Okay.
Right. And when the nerve in my back touches the herniated disc, I can't move. I think you've seen me like this before, where like I'm stuck for like 3 days. The only thing that can get me to move, to get up, to go to the bathroom, to get dressed is to take half a pill, and it's like the magic elixir.
Yeah.
Right? All of a sudden I can get up, I can move, I have this false sense of security that everything is good now, and then it comes back in 4 to 6 hours, and I have a choice at that point. I either can lay back down and be horizontal until the issue subsides, or you can take another pill. And not everyone has the self-control to be able to say, I'm just going to lay down and wait and do 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off with ice. And you're just going to take another pill. And that feeling of being able to just eliminate the pain and the problems is not a safe thing. You can live on that stuff.
Yes. So I'm not a doctor, but I have now been around enough families and enough.
You're almost pretty much an expert.
I've heard this story before. This is what I would say if you were my client, or if I were a doctor and you were my patient, is that the pain is not being eliminated. It's just being dampened. Like the opium is covering the marker of the pain. The pain is there for a reason. It's your body's physiological response to something going on. And so yes, taking an opiate does cover or mask the pain. But what we know now from the CDC data is that if you are prescribed a week of prescription opioids, a 7-day supply, 7% of the population is refilling that prescription a year later. So if you think about that just as its own statistical proof, if you start a prescription of prescription opioids, a 1-week prescription, if you fill it, if a doctor writes it and you take it to a pharmacy, we know now that 7% of that population is still refilling a year later. If you refill that week prescription, like you get a week and then you get a refill for the second week, we know that 17% of the population is still refilling a year later. And if you have a 30-day prescription and you refill that prescription, we know more than 30% of the population is still refilling it a year later.
So are you saying like a 7-day prescription, like refilling on 7-day increments?
Yeah.
A year later?
Yeah.
I thought you were saying 7 days and then a year later they refill.
They're still refilling a year later.
That's insane.
Right. So but again, it is insane, except for it's opium.
Yeah, it's correct. It's opium that's been processed
You're right.
the perfect way and put in a pill
Right.
by the smartest scientists in America.
Right. Now, to put it in a little more context, so of course, I've had plenty of time to read about all of this. And it occurred to me that there have been other occasions where this has happened. And so to me, I found this great quote that says that there's no new evil in the world. We just reinvent ways to deliver pain, right? And so it made me think about the historical passages of all of this. And so I was reading about when England was colonizing India in the early 1800s, it became cost prohibitive, right? England was spending a whole bunch of money on its colony in India. And, you know, back in England at Parliament, they're like, we have this colony to make us money, to make us the empire under the sun, right?
Yeah,
The sun
the
never
money should
sets
flow
on-
back to us.
Right. But it's draining
Yeah,
our
yeah.
coffers. What's the biggest cash crop in India? The poppy fields.
Yeah.
The English Parliament didn't want to sully itself with being peddlers of opium. So they gave a charter to a company that would take the poppy in England, the opium in England, or in India, and sell it somewhere else. The East India Trade Company. And so the East India Trade Company would take cannonball size, balls of opium and put them on these huge ships and take it to China. I think you might know where I'm going with this. So in China at this time, in the early 1800s, the Chinese people thought the white man, they were barbarians, big, hairy, crude, rude, smelly white men on big ships that were coming in. They would not let us come inland. They had this one little port with these big gates. And this is where all the camps were for all the shippers who would come and land, and they would have markets outside of the gates, and then the goods could be taken inside the gates, right? Well, we started bringing all the opium into China. Well, all of a sudden, opium became a problem in China, and the Chinese emperor decided, look, I don't know what they're bringing to us, but this is awful, right? So they decided to punish the users. They were going to arrest their way out of the problem. And so what they began doing is flogging the opiate addicts in the streets to teach them a lesson. And all of a sudden, they were flogging 250,000 people. Like, I mean, it was perfect. So then they decided, okay, we can't beat our way, we can't punish our way out of the users. So if you get caught dealing the white man's opium in China, we're going to publicly strangulate you. Like, you have to get on your knees in the town square and we're going to strangle you. Well, after they executed 25,000 drug dealers, the Chinese emperor said, this isn't working. So he created an embargo around this little inlet and put up his warships. Well, unbeknownst to the Chinese emperor, the greatest sea wartime navy in the world at this point was owned by the East India Trade Company. So the East India Trade Company, under charter with Parliament, had war powers, blew up the blockade and occupied this little inlet called Hong Kong. And Britain didn't give it up for another 100 years. And it resulted in the toppling of the Chinese emperor, the Chinese diaspora, the Boxer Rebellion, and it's how we wound up with the Chinese immigrants into the west coast of America, and they brought with them their opium. And so then we began to see the first signs of opiate addiction and laudanum in the 19-teens in America. And so, like I said, I've said this before, it's like Pandora's box. Every time we've figured out a new, better delivery system of opium, we've had an outbreak, right? When there was a new market in China, there was an outbreak. When there was a new market in America in the early 1900s, there was an outbreak. And what we've done here in America is we created a new market when the pharmaceutical industry jumped on board with opium
Yeah.
and turned
A license.
in license to dispense. History repeats itself.
My brain is like, now that you've said it all, it's all clicking. And
What's the alternative, right? If opiates go away, right? If you just get rid of them and remove them from society, what is the alternative method of pain resolution for individuals?
For you, it's surgery, right? For cancer patients, for palliative care, it's morphine, right? What I think there is an absolute place, not only in our society, but in the practice of medicine for opiates. No question about it. But I think where this thing really went off the rails is, in the early 2000s, when there were clear signs of abuse. It's when it wasn't pain specialists or oncologists or board certified doctors that were prescribing it, when all of a sudden we were pushing the pain pills through family physicians that were just handing it out like aspirin or an ibuprofen or an anti-inflammatory. That's where it really turned the corner. And there were supposed to be safety valves on all of this distribution chain of supply, and we just blew through it, right? But again, it's not like there was a speed limit for 55 and that there were doctors prescribing at 60 miles an hour or 70 miles an hour, right?
Going 1,000 miles an hour.
Right. It's like if the safety valve on your hot water tank is supposed to be 120 degrees, we were letting it get to 500 degrees.
I see a lot of parallels to and same time frame too, to the mortgage crisis.
There should have been so many different clear indicators to people that there was a problem. And the sad part about the opioid epidemic is that in the mid 2000s, the DEA did try to intervene. It's a whole nother story. There's a great 60-minute series on it with Joe Ranazisi from the DEA, who the title of the segment is called Whistleblower, where he went after the distributors to try to choke down the supply, and they went to Congress and got him fired.
Funny how that works. While you're going through the story, I've been in the mass tort world for a good bit now. I see the verdicts come out or on the opioid stuff here or there pops up, but generally it's been extremely quiet in the news and the news cycle.
Yeah.
And I'm very surprised that I want to know who's behind the scenes making sure that none of this news is getting out to the public, because I didn't realize it was 50 billion. Or what did you say, 70 billion?
70 billion now, yeah.
You hear it?
But
it goes away. The news cycle
very quick. It'll be like, oh, Walgreens has to settle for whatever. I don't think most of the audience knows it's 70 billion. And it's like that news cycle. I know they had a bad PR section for a while, but the pharmaceutical industry has kept this under hush pretty well.
The most astonishing thing to me is that most of the companies that settled with us, their stock prices rose after the settlement.
Yeah.
They're reducing the exposure.
Yeah. It's these companies are so large, they're impossible to fail, and they vertically integrate and consolidate. The market's in a contraction. There's more money in the market than you've ever seen. So yeah, I mean, it's astonishing.
Was the opioid issue related to your presidential run?
No, completely
Around the
unrelated.
same time.
The presidential run was right before all of this happened. Yeah.
How did that come about? What's the why?
So I'm from Southern West Virginia, and a very heavy coal companies, the industry. And if you think about it, it's not just the coal miners, right? Is that you have the pension funds, the healthcare funds, you have the service supply, you have the people that make the pipe, you have the people that make the steel, people that make the machines, the electricity, the water pumps. I mean, it's an entire ecosystem. It's the entire infrastructure of Southern West Virginia revolves around coal. And we like to think that, we were there for World War II. We built the skyscrapers. We powered the company. We were strong for our country. And then Barack Obama ran for president, and one of his platform positions was that it was okay to mine coal, but he was going to make it so expensive he would bankrupt the coal companies. It's a quote of his. He believed in the Clean Water Act, and he wanted to transition away from fossil fuel energy, and that was a big platform. So Hillary ran against him in the first time for the Democratic primary, and Hillary went and took the opposite position. She came to West Virginia, and she went around campaigning that she was the granddaughter of a coal miner, and that she'll never forget. Never forget. So then it was Hillary's turn to run for president.
What year was this? 2016?
Yeah. It was Hillary's turn to run for president. And she went on national television and said she was going to continue Barack's policy. And she literally said, you can find it on YouTube, we're going to put a lot of coal companies and coal miners out of work.
We're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business. Right, Tim? And we're going to make it clear that we don't want to forget those people. Those people labored in those mines for generations.
She said that out loud. And I remembered what she had said in West Virginia. And it pissed me off. In fact, I think what she actually said was, we're going to put a lot of coal companies and coal miners out of business. Right, Ted? To somebody in the audience. I spent a tremendous amount of time trying to find Ted. I can't remember if that's his name or not, but that's the quote.
She wasn't in West Virginia when she said this.
No.
She was just on her campaign trail.
No, but she did have to come back to West Virginia and do a round table at one of our local community halls to try to repair the damage. But by that time, it was too late. Well, it pissed me off when this happened. So I started doing some research into it. And there were two things that I found interesting. One was that what Barack Obama did was genius. So he couldn't get his bill through Congress. And so he used the EPA, he used administrative action through the EPA to adopt policies and procedures that no other president had been able to do. So I went back and started looking at this. Like in 1970, the clean water, we developed this EPA emissions regulations, and then we studied it through to George Bush. The George Bush EPA administration found there was not enough sufficient evidence to show mercury in coal emissions. And then Clinton reversed it. And then George Bush Jr. reversed it. And then Obama came in and put it through. And through administrative fiat, he was able to shut down our industry. And I warned people about giving too much power to the person sitting behind the desk in the Oval Office. Because what happens if one day the man sitting or woman sitting back there doesn't share your ideology? It's a little
foreshadowing.
But in general, what I did was I went to my Senator Joe Manchin, and Joe had just taken Bob Byrd's seat, the longtime West Virginia senator. And I was reading Bob Byrd's book. So Senator Bob Byrd was the senator from West Virginia forever. And one of the stories that I read about was in 1976, he ran for president as the sitting U.S. senator in West Virginia. And he won 31 of the 33 delegates. And that was the year Jimmy Carter was nominated as president. And Jimmy Carter had to go through like 10, 11, 13 votes to get the consensus. And then everybody pledged their delegates to Jimmy Carter, except Bob Byrd, the young senator from West Virginia. So Jimmy Carter went to him and said, hey, we're going to be unanimous here. It's what we do is, after all the votes, you pledge your delegates to me. And Bob Byrd said, no, I'm not giving them to you. And Jimmy Carter said, what do you want? And he goes, I want to be Senate Appropriations Chair. And that's how Bob Byrd got to be Senate Appropriations Chair. So when this cycle came around, I called my Senator Joe Manchin. And I said, you're in Bob Byrd's seat. I just read this chapter. Let me tell you what he did. You're in an off cycle. You don't have to get up your Senate seat, right? You don't run for Senate for another 4 years. You can run for president right now. In West Virginia alone, you can go around the state saying that you won't forget, that you'll always remember. And by the way, you're having trouble getting your pension fund bill, the UMWA pension fund bill through Congress, right? So you can hold on to that. And then when you win 31 of 33 delegates, you can tell Hillary, that you'll pledge your delegates, but she has to put your pension bill on her 100-day plan. It's a no-brainer. You can raise a war chest. You'll be you'll be taking the place of Bob Byrd's seat. You're beloved in our state. It's a no-brainer, Joe. And he said, I can't do it. I can't do it, Paul. He said, I've already pledged my support to Hillary. The Clintons are heavy-handed on the Democratic Party, and there'll be consequences if I do that, and I'm afraid to do it. So I got pissed off.
At least he was honest with you.
Oh, he was perfectly honest. So I got pissed off, and I walked across the street to the state capitol, and I wrote a $2,500 check to put my name on the ballot so that it would say Bernie Sanders, Vermont, Hillary Clinton, New York, Paul Farrell Jr., West Virginia. And I got 9% of the vote. I was about 200 votes shy of getting 3 delegates to the national convention. I didn't spend a dollar. I didn't raise a dollar. I just knew that when people looked at the ballot and they saw, the choice of West Virginia versus New York and Hillary and Bernie, that it was a protest vote, I guess, if you would. And I tell you this, if Bernie had dropped out of the race, I'd have won West Virginia. I would have won West Virginia.
What a story.
So you're telling me you're going to run again?
No. I was making a point, I think, to the state Democratic Party to pay attention to what's happening in our home. And they didn't. And that's why my state is as red today as any state in the country.
Speaking of the EPA thing, I'm pretty sure a bunch of all that got rolled back.
Yes.
Because the Supreme Court said that the EPA cannot make up laws because they're not a governing body.
A little bit too late for my home.
Yes.
Yes.
I want to shift gears and talk about your involvement with another litigation, the Google antitrust cases.
You're quite the Renaissance man.
Or either that or tilting at windmills and chasing dragons.
For the law firms, the partners who are watching this, who have a vision for enacting change, right? I think your story is empowering and insightful for them to understand that if you truly believe in something and you want to make change in something, that is the power that a single individual has. You have your bar license. All you got to do is go and figure out, how is this actually happening behind the scenes, and how can we use the system to enact change? Which is, listen, the plaintiffs' lawyers, they win a lot of money for their clients. They help them in times of need. But even a level beneath that, actually being able to fix a broken system is rewarding and outlasts you, right? You enact change in society. I think it's fantastic. I think that in and of itself is a great takeaway for lawyers who are watching, who truly believe in something that doesn't have an MDL wrapped around it or doesn't have a templated process. And you just see this is a thing. It's opioids, or it's the newspapers, right? Or it's the coal miners, to pull on that thread and figure out how to get behind it. And it could become a $70 billion change the world moment.
Well, you never chase the money, right? Is what I've always said, is that what you chase is doing the right thing. And that doing the right thing doesn't always make you money, but doing the right thing is always the guiding principle. And so, some people find their passion in politics, some people find it in medicine, some find it in law. And so if you keep a principled approach of, I'm a flawed man, but
Well, we all are.
I'm going to do my best to try to make a difference. And so it has come in small things and it's come in very large things. I've rebuilt Little League fields. I've coached youth league soccer teams, but I wasn't the guy that stacked the YMCA soccer team with all the little Johnny studs. I'm the one that took the team that the kids didn't get picked. And then I put my kids on that team. And so I think maybe I do probably have a little anti-authority in me, I don't like bullies, but I think that's kind of what the driving force of being what a trial lawyer is standing up for the little guy. And what happens when the little guy is your entire hometown, then now you have a fight.
Let's talk about the newspapers, right? Okay. So you identified an issue with the newspaper publishers being edged out by Google.
Yes.
Can you talk about what you identified and how you aggregated this group of newspaper publishers and
Sure.
turned it into something larger and more meaningful?
So I think we need to start with a casual observation about newspapers in general. In the early 1900s, everybody has seen the television depictions or of the kid with the newspaper bag standing on the corner,
Mm-hmm.
Extra, extra, read all about it, 5 cents for the Daily Times, right? Newspapers never made their money on the actual sale of the newspaper, nickels and quarters or whatever it is it cost in different times. They made their money on advertising and the classifieds. That's their business model. So when the internet tide came, it took away Craigslist and all these other bulletin boards, took away the classified ads. And that was a big problem for the newspapers, but they still had their advertising. But nonetheless, the business model still remained as it was, right? So now let me shift gears and tell you the story, link the story back to the Charleston Gazette and the $700 million. That newspaper article was written by a journalist by the name of Eric Eyre, E-Y-R-E. He wrote a 3-part article about the opioid epidemic in 2016, and he won the Pulitzer Prize for journalism, the first out of West Virginia. The Charleston Gazette, right? That's local newspaper. It's a local newspaper, won the Pulitzer Prize, and started the opioid litigation by this one individual journalist being curious enough to ask tough questions and publish something that got him in trouble a little bit because it was sensitive information. So Charleston, West Virginia, back in the day, had 2 newspapers, a left-leaning and a right-leaning newspaper. And most people growing up remember that 2 newspapers in your town, whether you're in Iowa, Nebraska, West Virginia, there was a left and a right-leaning newspaper. Well, when the classified ads became digital and when the digital advertising started to become prominent, newspapers began to struggle. And the Charleston Gazette and the Charleston Daily Mail tried to merge, not sharing ideology, but tried to merge their operating print press so that they could survive. And the Department of Justice came in and broke apart that merger agreement under Antitrust, separated them back out, and they both failed, right? So I started thinking, well, what happens if you can figure out how to, instead of using antitrust to destroy the First Amendment and free speech and newspapers, use it to enable it? Because what I was learning from the owner of the newspaper that won the Pulitzer Prize was that he's not going to be able to survive much longer in the current environment. And we started digging into it and researching it and trying to understand it better. So in general, without getting into all the boring details, is Google began with the search engine and built the search engine into the single largest generator of advertising in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got tired of people clicking on their links and going to other people's websites and spending money somewhere else. So then they started buying websites to bring inside their walled garden, like YouTube and maps and images, and building the infrastructure so that people, that not only they came to the search engine, but when they clicked on a link, they still stayed within the Google family and generated more revenue, right? And so you got to think about it. It's like if you're Pampers and you want to reach out to people that want to buy diapers, you can put a billboard up on a busy highway and maybe catch the attention of 1 out of every 50 drivers. Or you can give less money to Google, who will say, I will put your logo on every page that the newborn mama goes to.
Because they have enough data to know who those people
Because
are.
we know all the data about these people. Within their walled garden, it became a powerful advertising tool. But that's not what the newspaper's problem was. The newspaper's problem was Google they weren't just okay with that. They were still looking at everybody else's website that was generating clicks because they have news. They had news aggregators. So they were always looking at other people's websites and say, how do we capture more money there? So what they came up with is they came up with a template, like a picture frame that goes around your website. And they sold that to companies and said that on your website, we will generate the advertising that goes around. You no longer have to go out and sell your advertising to other people. We'll generate it for you, right? So
And it will give you a portion of.
and so if you think about this platform now, is that if you want Google to generate it for you, you have to pay Google a portion of the revenue you're generating.
This is DoubleClick, right? Okay.
And if you're the advertiser and you want to go on that platform, you have to hire Google and pay them a portion of the fee to do it. So it's like having the stock market when Google gets paid by the buyer of the stock and the seller of the stock. And by the way, Google's running the stock exchange.
Right. They control the price.
They control the price and they get a cut left, they get a cut right, they get a cut in the middle. And they literally get to control it. And then you have like the Jedi Blue where they go to Facebook and they say, Facebook says, hey, we're going to start a competing stock market like a NASDAQ. And Google says, I got an idea. Don't compete with us. Instead, we'll give you preferential treatment on the bidding process. So anyway, what ends up happening now is the newspapers. So the newspapers have already lost their classifieds. And now they are late to the game on digital advertising because they're still stuck on selling ads on their printed newspapers, right? And so they're late to the transition game and they're trying to stay alive. So now they're going to Google, now they're going to it and they're trying to figure out how it is we can generate revenue. But at this point in time, there's no way they have tenfold increased their viewership. They've gone from 25,000 printed copies to 250,000 hits a day, but they're making 10% of the revenue. The model doesn't survive. This digital advertising model doesn't survive. Then Google does something in addition to that. Is the newspapers, in order to survive for the first time in the history of newspapers, they have to go to a subscriber-based model, the paywall, right? Well, Google says to them, if you put up a paywall, we're not going to list you on our news hits, on our search, on our Google machine.
Because it's gated and they can't crawl it.
So you have to give every independent user 10 free hits a month. That's why when you go to Google and you click on the link, sometimes you can read the content and sometimes you can't. So as a result, all of these smaller newspapers, in order to show up on Google, they have to give 10 free clicks a month or whatever the time period is. And so when you click on the Charleston Gazette now, you go to the Charleston Gazette, you hit the paywall, and then what do? You go back to Google, they get another round of revenue, and then you click on the next newspaper on the same topic, and then you get the free look.
Which has ads posted by Google.
So if you go to the UNC School of Journalism, North Carolina School of Journalism, they have a map called the News Desert. And you can see on the News Desert the continued diminishment of journalism in America. Eventually we're going to wind up with, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, right? It's like we're going to end up with Fox and CNN, right? We are moving toward we're going to lose more and more of our newspapers. We're going to lose local journalism, and we're going to become a nation leaning to the left or leaning to the right on national politics.
How has that litigation evolved? Because now you're talking about 2016 when this started. We're in 2026, right? The digital landscape is very different now than it was a decade ago, but the litigation is still ongoing. It's expanded beyond the initial 200 publishers.
It is massive. And so the federal government has stepped in, the state attorney generals have stepped in. There's going to be some monumental break. They're going to do something with Google, in my humble opinion.
They already started
They've already started the dismantling.
Yeah.
But there's going to be some fundamental separation of the walled garden from the DoubleClick, right? And then there'll be a spinoff or something. But in the meantime, the largest of the newspaper publishers that have aggregated, they're going to be able to recover fractions of pennies on a click, multiplied by billions of clicks that are going to recover. But the fractions of the pennies of the click recovery that happens in antitrust is not going to be enough to save local journalism. There's going to have to be a new evolution of journalism that survives the collapse of our local newspapers across America.
Are you working with Zeke DeRose and the Lanier firm on these cases as well?
I have been. We've shared a lot of information. They're operating at a much higher level, at a much bigger level, a much more important level. They're going to impact national policy. I'm just trying to save a couple of newspapers.
How do you think that those publishers and any publisher on the web now, right? Like news is, I don't want to say it's commoditized right now, but like I can go to the beach and I could film, something that happens, like that becomes news. Like
right.
Everybody is a media outlet. But when you have someone like Google or OpenAI who is ingesting all of this and then providing the summarized responses on their own platforms, at some point there's a break with the publishers and the creators, the news media outlets, where if they're not getting the clicks, they're not generating the revenue.
The AI now, they just ingest all the news and they serve it up in the response and make it so that you don't get any ad revenue because they never even go to the site.
It potentially turns from a news desert into a complete creation desert, a publisher desert, where new content isn't being created because there's no incentive to do so.
Yeah, I think, did Elon Musk have something? He had an everyman kind of platform of every man can be their own journalist. His idea was that news is going to be created on the ground by individuals.
Well, that was kind of why he bought Twitter and turned it to X, to keep it a public town hall that anyone could publish on that isn't regulated. That's the idea.
Well, my biggest concern is that what we're going to lose is the local journalist who is, has enough courage to write an article about 700 million pills that effectuates change. And so, to me, maybe I'm just old enough now to be old school. Professional journalism is important in America for visibility, transparency, accountability. And maybe what ends up happening is we have a couple of influencers that have enough credibility that they can report on the news accurately and that people trust them. But there is going to be a seismic change, especially with AI, with news aggregators. But as long as Google maintains its stranglehold on the largest monopoly ever created in the world, the digital revenue is going to still flow in one direction.
Do you think that it's a calculated play by Google to keep ads out of Gemini right now?
So, what we're talking about is we're talking geopolitical strategy, right? We're talking about the largest companies in the world. It's like the same thing when you're talking about, Chinese, Russia, and America, and, policy positions on their power struggle. This is no different. These are corporations in an amoral setting. And I don't mean immoral, I mean amoral. In the absence of morality, these are corporations acting in some type of business enterprise of growth and survival. And so, Google has its own AI strategy. I think everybody does. I think it's just they're going to hold on to what they have for as long as they can until the Department of Justice Antitrust Division gets involved.
What do you think the landscape looks like 5 to 10 years from now?
I have no idea. It's still, with AI in the legal world, I can't fathom that AI is going to replace thinking lawyers, just like I can't envision AI replacing thinking journalists or thinking doctors. But, the world is quickly evolving with technology. It's what we've learned from the social media stuff, right, is that there are patterns to the way the human brain thinks, and it can be influenced by the way in which we feed it information. And that's scary.
Elon Musk, in a recent interview, I saw him in a paraphrase. He said he was asked about AI eating jobs and replacing humans. And he said that the last frontier of AI replacing humans is in the real world, right? Like physical interactions, right? Paul, John, can you replace me with an AI? No. Can I use AI to help me understand your background quicker, to help prepare for this interview better? Sure, that could be done. But there is not a robot that can sit here powered by AI that can actually have real world interactions. We're here at Mass Torts Puerto Rico having real human interactions. And until there is some way that no one can really conceptualize right now of what the future will look like, where AI actually integrates itself into like physical manifestation, that is the last frontier that I think we have to hold on to. Real people, real interactions, doing real things, assisted by AI. That's okay.
But here's the interesting thing, right? You and I can't replace the connection we've just had, right? The three of us have had a conversation. We've connected. We've spoken our minds and our hearts. We've had an experience that can't be replicated by machines.
Yeah, I can't replicate the feeling I had when you said like 700 million pills.
Yes. But I'll tell you what you could do is you could probably ask AI to generate a fictional panel to show on a TV screen to other people that have the impact on other people, right? Is AI can figure out what combination of interaction works best in a podcast with enough emotional connection that it makes somebody feel something watching it on a television screen. But it can never replace our personal interaction here today.
And we'll never replace this conversation. This is awesome. This is great. I love learning about your background and
Fascinating.
the change that you've already enacted and continue to enact in this country is absolutely fucking incredible. Thank you for the work that you continue to do for this country, and I really appreciate you joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Awesome. Paul Farrell, Farrell and Fuller.
I am Paul Farrell Jr. of Farrell and Fuller. I'm on the John and Mark podcast. Hit subscribe and like.